My name is Nora Bennett, and I'm 46 years old. From the outside, my life appeared polished, flawless, like a perfectly framed picture. I lived in the heart of Sibiu, Romania, a town adorned with cobblestone streets and Gothic architecture that looked like it had been plucked out of a fairy tale. I was a successful accountant with a reputation for precision and trustworthiness. My husband David was my rock, steadfast, devoted, and patient. Together we had 3 children who were our pride and joy. Lila, our spirited 14-year-old, Adrian, a thoughtful 11-year-old, and little Clara, who at only 8, was the light of our family. But beyond the surface, there were moments, slivers of time in the quiet hours, when doubt shadowed my world. Faith was the bedrock of our existence. Christianity wasn't merely a practice. It was woven into the fabric of who we were. I attended church every Sunday without fail, volunteered for charity groups, and recited scripture like second nature. My dedication was steadfast, yet there were cracks in my certainty, faint fissures that I never dared expose. Late at night, as David lay beside me, his breathing calm and rhythmic, my mind off. Was salvation really as clear-cut as the sermons claimed? Could one doctrine hold the entirety of the truth while so many kind, good-hearted people lived outside its bounds? I'd ask myself these questions and immediately rebuke them, blaming my fleeting uncertainty on human weakness. Even my children unknowingly stirred those dormant thoughts. Lila once asked me about her friend Anna, a cheerful and kind girl who didn't come from a family of believers. "Mom," she'd said, "why wouldn't Anna be allowed into heaven? She's good. Isn't that enough?" Her question lingered in my mind, leaving an uncomfortable echo. I'd answered her, of course, repeating the teachings we had been raised with. But deep down, I struggled with what those words meant, what they implied about love and justice. For the most part, though, life went on in its ordered rhythm. My days were consumed by work, family, and faith. I loved the bustling energy of our home, especially the mornings when everything seemed alive and full of purpose. On one such morning, a Tuesday no less, I rose before dawn. The sky was an indigo canvas speckled with the last stars of the night. The scent of fresh coffee wafted through the kitchen as I set the table, ensuring everything was ready before the house stirred. Adrian's soccer bag needed packing, Clara's homework folder required checking, and Lila had somehow managed to forget her phone on the hallway table. David kissed me on the cheek as he left for work, his warm smile offering its usual reassurance. I hummed to myself while clearing the plates from breakfast, comforted by the soft murmur of the radio in the background. It was a beautiful spring morning, crisp yet sunny, with the promise of renewal in the air. For a fleeting moment, I thought to myself, life is... But, as is often the case with our fragile human narratives, that moment wasn't built to last. As I prepared to leave for an important accounting meeting in a neighboring city, the unease that had been simmering quietly beneath the surface began to rise. It was subtle at first, a whisper in the wind, a fleeting thought I couldn't quite grasp. I dismissed it easily, chalking it up to nerves. However, as I merged onto the main motorway, that sense of foreboding deepened. A large truck entered my view, its cargo stacked precariously high with steel pipes. The straps securing them looked worn, barely holding their weight. I instinctively kept my distance, my fingers tightening slightly around the steering wheel. Something about it felt wrong. I'd always trusted my intuition, but this time I tried to rationalize my discomfort. It's just another truck, nothing's going to happen. Little did I know, this was the beginning of a journey that would forever alter the course of my life. A journey that would stretch far beyond the bounds of my earthly existence. My story was about to take a turn no one could have foreseen. The days before my accident were nothing out of the ordinary, at least on the surface. Life moved in its familiar rhythm, as it always had. Yet, looking back, I can now see how the pieces of the puzzle were subtly shifting, aligning in ways I could not have anticipated. It began with the smallest of things, insignificant coincidences, or so I thought at the time. My car keys, for example, which I always left on the kitchen counter, began appearing in odd places. Once I found them sitting on my bedroom windowsill, glinting in the sunlight. No one in the family claimed to have moved them. Just your mind playing tricks on you, I reassured myself. But it wasn't just the keys. One morning, as I walked Clara to school, the air felt unusually heavy, almost oppressive. The cherry blossoms that lined our street were in full bloom, their petals a delicate carpet of pink and white. It should have been beautiful, uplifting even. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was out of place. Clara tugged on my hand, her voice snapping me out of my thoughts. "Mama, are you listening?" she asked, her bright eyes searching mine. I smiled and nodded, but inside unease simmered. Later that evening during dinner, Adrian asked a question that made the room go silent. "Mom," he began, pausing as if searching for the right words, "what happens when we die?" The question was innocent, the kind of thing children ask when they're trying to understand the world. Yet for some reason, it struck a chord deep within me. "We go to heaven," I replied, my voice steady. "If we live good, faithful lives, God welcomes us home." He seemed satisfied with my answer, but I wasn't. Not really. That night, long after the children had gone to bed, I found myself standing at the window, staring at the moonlit streets below. My reflection in the glass felt unfamiliar, like I was looking at a stranger. The questions that Adrian and Lila had asked, the ones that I had tried so hard to push aside, came rushing back. Could it really be so simple? Was faith alone enough to guarantee salvation? And what about those who didn't share my beliefs? Were they truly lost, as I had been taught to believe? I closed my eyes, trying to will the doubts away. "Focus on what you know to be true," I told myself. Yet, no matter how much I tried, the unease refused to leave. 2 days before the accident, I stopped by the local grocery store after work to pick up a few things for dinner. As I browsed the aisles, a man in a weathered coat caught my eye. He was older, with a kind face and eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding. He stood near the canned goods, studying a can of soup as though it held the answers to life's great mysteries. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to him. As I passed by, he turned to me and smiled, a warm, knowing smile that made me feel both comforted and unsettled. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentle. "Do you ever feel like there's more to life than what we can see?" The question caught me off guard. "I suppose so," I replied, not quite sure what to make of the interaction. He nodded, his smile never faltering. "Sometimes the answers we seek find us when we least expect them," he said before turning back to the soup. I walked away, my mind spinning. Who was he, and why had his words felt so significant? By the time I left the store, he was gone, leaving me with nothing but a strange sense of anticipation. The night before the accident, I had a dream, though it felt more like a memory. In it, I was a child again, running through the fields behind my grandparents' house. The air was warm, and the sky stretched endlessly above me. I could hear laughter, light and joyous, though I couldn't see where it was coming from. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I found myself falling, tumbling into darkness. But then, just as quickly, I was caught, not by hands, but by something intangible, like a soft golden light. It cradled me, lifting me back toward the surface. "You're not alone," a voice whispered, so faint that I wasn't sure if I had truly heard it or simply imagined it. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. David stirred beside me, his breathing steady and rhythmic. I glanced at the clock. 3:18 a.m. The house was quiet, but I couldn't shake the lingering feeling of the dream. I sat up, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders, and stared into the darkness. What did it mean? Was it just my subconscious, or was it something more? The next morning, as I prepared to leave for my meeting, I couldn't shake the sense that I was on the cusp of something significant. The world felt different. The colors seemed brighter, the sounds sharper. Even the air seemed to carry a charge, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. As I merged onto the motorway, the uneasy feeling that had been building over the past few days reached its peak. The truck ahead of me loomed large, its load of steel pipes swaying precariously with each turn. I couldn't help but think of the man in the grocery store, his question echoing in my mind. Do you ever feel like there's more to life than what we can see? In that moment, I felt a strange mix of fear and acceptance. It was as if some part of me knew what was coming, even if I couldn't fully grasp it. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and whispered a silent prayer, not knowing that the journey I was about to embark on would change everything I thought I knew about myself, my faith, and the world around me. The motorway stretched endlessly ahead, its dull gray expanse flanked by rolling fields that were just beginning to bloom with the colors of spring. The radio hummed softly in the background, playing a mix of news updates and soothing instrumentals, but I barely noticed. My mind was preoccupied with the details of the meeting I was heading to, the spreadsheets, the presentations, the numbers that danced endlessly in my head. It was a beautiful day, bright and crisp, the kind that made you feel alive. And yet, that lingering sense of unease from the past few days refused to leave me. The truck came into view as I rounded a gentle curve. It was a hulking beast, its load of steel pipes towering high and swaying slightly with every bump in the road. The straps securing them looked frayed, worn from use, and my instincts immediately told me to maintain a safe distance. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening as a faint chill ran down my spine. It's just another truck, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. But the feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. A gnawing, insistent voice in the back of my mind that something was terribly wrong. I tried to push it aside, focusing instead on the hum of the car, the steady rhythm of the road beneath. Yet, as I followed the truck, the unease turned into dread. The moment it happened, time seemed to stretch and twist, each second dragging on endlessly. The truck hit a small bump in the road, and I watched, horrified, as one of the frayed straps snapped with a loud crack. It was as though the world had shifted into slow motion. The steel pipes began to slide forward, their weight too much for the remaining straps to bear. For a brief moment, they teetered on the edge of the truck bed, before gravity took over. The first pipe flew through the air like a missile, spinning end over end as it hurtled toward the pavement. My foot slammed on the brake instinctively, the tires screeching in protest as I tried to put as much distance as possible between myself and the chaos unfolding ahead. But it was too late. One of the pipes struck the road with a deafening clang, bouncing once before hurtling straight toward me. The sun caught its surface for a brief second, a flash of light that burned itself into my memory. Then the impact was deafening. The windshield shattered in an explosion of glass and metal, fragments scattering like lethal confetti. The steering wheel jerked violently in my hands as the car spun out of control, the world outside a blur of motion and sound. I heard the screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal, and then nothing. There was a moment of silence, an absence of sensation so complete that it felt as though the world had simply ceased to exist. Then, slowly, awareness returned, but it was not what I expected. I wasn't in my car, trapped in the wreckage as I had feared. Instead, I was floating, weightless, above the scene. Below me, I saw my car, a mangled shell of twisted metal and shattered glass. Smoke rose in thin tendrils from the engine, and the acrid smell of burning rubber filled the air. Paramedics swarmed the scene, their faces tight with concentration, as they worked to extract a figure from the wreckage. It took me a moment to realize that the figure was me. I stared at my own body, battered and bloodied, pinned beneath the crushed frame of the car. There was no pain, no fear, only a profound sense of detachment, as though I were watching a scene from a movie rather than the reality of my own life. The truck driver was pacing nearby, his face pale and stricken as he ran his hands through his hair. A small crowd had gathered, their murmurs of shock and concern carrying faintly on the breeze. And then I noticed the light. At first, it was subtle, a faint glow that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere all at once. But it grew quickly, enveloping me in its warmth and brilliance. It wasn't like any light I had ever seen before, neither harsh nor blinding, but alive, almost tangible. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt both alien and intimately familiar, as though it were resonating with something deep within me. The light brought with it a sense of peace so profound that it took my breath away, if I had been breathing at all. It was as though every worry, every fear, every doubt I had ever carried was being stripped away, leaving only a raw, unfiltered sense of being. I felt whole in a way I never had before. Then came the voice. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. There were no words, no sounds, but a presence that spoke directly to my soul, bypassing the need for language altogether. It was a voice of love and understanding, infinite in its depth and wisdom, and it was calling me, inviting me to step closer to the light, to leave behind the pain and chaos of the world below. I hesitated, my thoughts turning to my family, David, Lila, Adrian, Clara. Their faces flashed before me, vivid and clear, each one etched with a mix of love and concern. Would they understand what had happened? Would they be okay without me? As if in response to my thoughts, the light seemed to shift, growing warmer and more reassuring. It was not an abandonment, the voice seemed to say, but a home, a reunion with something I had long forgotten but had always been a part of me. I began to move toward the light, drawn by its pull. But just as I felt myself crossing the threshold, a new sensation washed over me, one of resistance, as though something was anchoring me to the world below. The pull of the light was strong, but the tether to my life was stronger. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light faded. The warmth receded, replaced by a cold, sterile brightness. The sound of voices, sharp and urgent, pierced the stillness, pulling me back into my body. My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, each one a struggle, but undeniably real. The world came rushing back, a cacophony of noise, pain, and sensation. But in the midst of it all, one thought burned brightly in my mind, a fragment of the light I had left behind. This is not the end. It's only the beginning. I didn't wake up after the accident, not in the way you'd expect, at least. Instead, I found myself somewhere entirely different. Gone was the chaos of twisted metal and shattered glass, the deafening noises, the pain. What replaced it was silence, a serene, all-encompassing stillness that wrapped around me like a gentle embrace. At first, I thought I might still be in the hospital, emerging from the wreckage. But this wasn't a room I recognized. The space around me had no walls, no ceiling, no floor. It was infinite, unbound by the laws of nature I had always known. Yet it wasn't dark. A soft, golden glow permeated everything, as though the air itself was imbued with light. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but alive, radiant, and warm. It felt as though the light was breathing, slowly, rhythmically, like it was a living thing that recognized my presence and welcomed me. I began to move, though I couldn't feel my feet touching the ground. There was no effort, no friction. I simply drifted forward, drawn by something I couldn't yet identify. The warmth of the light surrounded me, enveloping me, and with it came a sensation so profound it brought tears to my eyes, love. Pure, unfiltered, unconditional love. It wasn't the kind of love bound by expectations or conditions. It was vast, boundless, all-encompassing. It filled every corner of my soul and spilled over into places I hadn't even known existed. Am I dreaming? I wondered. Is this what death feels like? There was no fear in that question, no urgency to find answers. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. The worries, doubts, and fears that had plagued me, the endless questions about faith, the expectations I had carried, were gone, stripped away like layers of an old, worn-out garment. What was left was something simpler, purer me. As I drifted further into the light, a presence emerged. A figure, faint at first, but growing clearer with every passing moment. It was neither intimidating nor overwhelming, though it carried an undeniable sense of authority and wisdom. I didn't need to see a face or hear a voice to know who. This presence spoke directly to my soul, bypassing words and explanations, and communicated through feelings, emotions, and pure understanding. It was God. No, it was something more specific, something more intimate. It was the essence of divinity itself, welcoming me back to a place I hadn't realized I'd been away from. The presence was both external and internal, surrounding me like the light, yet also resonating deep within me, as though it had always been there. It wasn't the distant, unknowable entity I had prayed to every day of my life. This was personal, familiar, like rediscovering a long-lost family member I had never known I was searching for. I felt the presence calling me forward, inviting me to step deeper into the light. Without hesitation, I obeyed, not out of fear or obligation, but out of an overwhelming desire to be closer to this love, this peace, this truth. Each step I took brought with it revelations, pieces of understanding that filled gaps I hadn't realized were there. I saw my life unfold before me, not as scattered memories or fleeting images, but as a seamless tapestry, every thread woven with meaning and purpose. The good moments, the bad moments, the moments I had cherished and the ones I had tried to forget, they were all laid bare before me. But there was no judgment in this review, no condemnation. Instead, there was clarity, a perspective that allowed me to see things as they truly were. I saw the moments when I had been kind, generous, and loving, and I felt the light in those actions. But I also saw the moments when I had judged others, when I had let pride guide my faith instead of love. I saw how I had hurt those closest to me, unintentionally yet undeniably. I saw my daughter, Lila, as she asked me about her friend Anna, and I felt the weight of my hollow answer. I had told her that faith was everything, that goodness wasn't enough. But the love emanating from this presence seemed to suggest other. It wasn't what mattered, it was love. Then came the voices. They weren't voices in the traditional sense. There were no words spoken, no lips moving. But the messages were clear. They were voices of guidance, of assurance, urging me to let go of the beliefs that had kept me bound and embrace the truth that was being revealed to me. You are loved, they said. You are worthy. You are known. As I listened, I felt the tears fall freely down my cheeks. Not tears of sorrow or regret, but tears of joy, of gratitude, of pure relief. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from the chains of expectation, from the burdens of obligation, from the doubts I had carried like stones in my heart. I was free to simply be. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light began to fade. The warmth receded, replaced by a cold, sterile brightness. The voices grew quiet, and the infinite expanse shrank into a confined space. I felt my body again, the weight of it, the pain, the limitations, and knew that I was being pulled back into the world I had left behind. But even as the light disappeared, its presence remained. I felt it within me, a spark of truth and love that I would carry forever. My life was no longer the same, and I knew that my journey was just beginning. The light had shown me a glimpse of something greater, and now it was my turn to share it with the world. The world I had known, the one built on years of devotion, rituals, and unquestioning belief, felt distant now, as though it existed in another dimension entirely. The peace of the light lingered around me, wrapping me in its warmth and clarity. But the love that had embraced me was not idle, it was purposeful. It was calling me to examine the very foundation of my existence, layer by layer. As I stood amidst this ethereal light, I began to see my life unfold before me, not as fragmented memories or scattered snapshots, but as a seamless, interconnected tapestry. Every thought, every belief was laid bare, stripped of the pretenses I had wrapped them in over the years. It was a revelation, an unflinching mirror held up to my soul. There were moments that shimmered brightly. The love I had shown to my children, the kindness extended to strangers, the sacrifices made in service to my faith. Those moments radiated with beauty and truth, affirming the goodness that existed within me. But there were other moments, darker threads woven into the tapestry, that demanded my attention. I saw the judgment I had passed on others, sometimes without even realizing it. The subtle pride in my heart as I viewed myself as someone who was chosen, someone who knew the correct path, while others wandered aimlessly in their ignorance. I had believed that faith alone would save me, that adherence to doctrine was enough to secure a place in heaven. Yet here, in the presence of this overwhelming love and truth, those beliefs felt hollow, inadequate. I thought of Lila's question, the one that had unsettled me but been brushed aside. Why wouldn't Chloe go to heaven? She's good. Isn't that enough? At the time, I had given her the answer I'd always known, an answer rooted in doctrine. But now, standing here, I understood what had made her words resonate so deeply. Chloe's goodness mattered. Her kindness, her love, they were reflections of something greater, something divine. How could any loving God dismiss that? The questions I had carried silently for years swirled around me. Why must faith be so rigid? Why must salvation be exclusive? Was I truly serving a divine purpose, or had I been serving my own pride? The answers were not spoken to me in words, but they filled me nonetheless, flowing through me like the warmth of the light. Love was the answer, not doctrine, not rituals, not exclusivity. It was love, boundless, unconditional, and universal. As these truths settled within me, I began to understand the depth of my misconception. I had been living a life guided by rules and rituals, believing that my adherence to them was enough to define me as a good person, a faithful believer. But I realize now that true faith was not about rules, it was about relationships, the relationships we build with one another and with the divine. The light pulsed gently around me, as if reassuring me, encouraging me to look deeper. And so I did. More memories surfaced, moments of doubt, questions I had suppressed out of fear of being wrong, of failing to live up to the expectations placed upon me. I saw the moments I had hurt others, not out of malice, but out of an unexamined certainty that I was right, that I knew better. I saw the times I had dismissed the beliefs of those who didn't share my faith, judging them not by their character but by their lack of adherence to my worldview. Yet, even as these memories unfolded, there was no condemnation. The love surrounding me was unwavering, constant, and unconditional. It wasn't here to punish me or chastise me. It was here to show me the truth, to open my eyes to the reality I had been blind to for so long. I began to feel lighter, as though the weight of those missteps, the pride, the judgment, the unspoken doubts, was being lifted from me, peeled away like layers of an old skin. I was being renewed, transformed, not through punishment but through understanding. The truth wasn't meant to destroy me, it was meant to set me free. As the revelations continued, I thought of my family, David, Lila, Adrian, and Clara. I thought of the values I had instilled in them, the lessons I had taught them about faith and life. Were they enough? Were they even correct? The thought pained me, but the light seemed to whisper gently, guiding me to see beyond the pain. I saw visions of my children, their futures unfolding before me. In one, they followed the path I had laid out for them, a life rooted in the same unquestioning faith I had lived by. They grew older, their lives outwardly full and secure, respected within their community. But beneath the surface, their souls were weighed down by the same doubts and emptiness I had carried. Their faith was strong but rigid, their hearts closed to the love and truth I had now experienced. And then I saw another future, a brighter, freer future, where they embraced the truths I had discovered. In this vision, their lives were transformed. Lila, who had always been so inquisitive, radiated a joy and peace that came from a deeper understanding of love and grace. Adrian, who often carried himself with quiet conviction, became a man who knew the power of forgiveness and compassion. Even Clara, young and full of innocence, grew into a woman whose faith was unburdened by rigidity, a faith that embraced the beauty of diversity and love. The vision brought tears to my eyes, a mix of sorrow and hope. I knew that the choices I made now would shape their futures, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on me. But along with that weight came a sense of purpose. I had a role to play, not as a teacher enforcing doctrines, but as a guide leading them toward love and truth. The light pulsed around me once more, a gentle reminder that I was not alone in this journey. The presence that had guided me was still there, unwavering and constant, offering its love and support. It didn't promise an easy path, but it promised a meaningful one. As the visions faded, I felt a profound sense of peace settle within me. The world I had known, the one built on rules, rituals, and unquestioning belief, had shattered, but what remained was something far greater. It was love, pure and unfiltered, and it was enough. As the light continued to envelop me, its warmth and boundless love radiating from every direction, I began to feel a pull, not away from this divine place of peace, but deeper within its embrace. It was as though the light wanted to show me something I needed to see, to understand. Then, like a ripple spreading across a calm pond, the light shifted. The infinite golden expanse around me softened, transforming into a series of images. At first they appeared faint, hazy, as though emerging from a distant memory, but as I focused, they grew clearer, sharper, until they surrounded me, each image more vivid than the last. I saw my family, David, Lila, Adrian, and Clara, each one woven into these visions as if they were threads in the fabric of my soul. The sight of their faces, so familiar and so beloved, brought a lump to my throat. Yet there was no time to dwell on my emotions, for the visions began to unfold before me with startling clarity. In one vision, I saw them as they were now, continuing on the path I had set them upon. Lila was leading the family in evening prayers, her voice steady and solemn, echoing the same words I had once recited with such conviction. She carried herself with grace, her movements deliberate, her faith unwavering. Adrian knelt beside her, his brows furrowed in concentration as he followed her lead. Little Clara, still so innocent, sat cross-legged on the floor, her small hands clasped together in prayer. On the surface, it was a beautiful image, one that I might have cherished in another life. But as the vision deepened, I saw the weight they carried, the weight of expectations, of rules and rituals, of a faith that demanded perfection and compliance. Lila's face, though calm, was lined with a quiet sadness, a longing she couldn't name. Adrian, ever the thoughtful one, wrestled silently with doubts he dared not voice. And Clara, though cheerful and innocent, was beginning to show signs of the same burdens that had once weighed me down. Their faith was steadfast, but it was rigid. Their lives were structured, but they lacked freedom. Their hearts were full of devotion, but devoid of the boundless love I had come to know in the light. My children were following the very path I had walked, a path that had brought me to the brink of my own spiritual emptiness. Then the vision shifted, and I saw another possibility, a brighter, freer future that filled my heart with hope and longing. In this vision, Lila was radiant, her spirit unburdened by the constraints of rigid doctrine. She laughed freely, her joy infectious, as she painted vibrant strokes of color on a canvas. Her art was an expression of her faith, a celebration of the love and beauty she had found in the world and in her relationship with the divine. Adrian, too, had transformed. Gone was the quiet, brooding boy who had once carried the weight of doubt and silence. In this vision, he was alive with purpose, his mind sharp and inquisitive. He stood before a group of young children, teaching them with passion and empathy, his words infused with the wisdom and grace he had discovered on his journey. And Clara, sweet, innocent Clara, was a vision of light and hope. She danced barefoot in a field of wildflowers, her laughter echoing through the air like a melody. Her heart was open, her soul unencumbered by fear or obligation. She radiated a love so pure, so boundless, that it seemed to illuminate the entire scene. Tears streamed down my face as I watched these visions of my children unfold. They were so different, these two futures, one bound by the chains of tradition, the other set free by the transformative power of love and truth. And I knew, with a certainty that pierced my very soul, that the choice of which path they would follow lay with me. As the visions faded, the light seemed to speak to me once more, not with words but with feelings, impressions, and a deep, unshakable understanding. It was not my role to force them to believe, to impose my newfound truth upon them. Instead, I was to live as a reflection of the love I had experienced, to be a guide and an example, and to trust in the divine to work through me. But the responsibility weighed heavily on me. I thought of David, steadfast, devoted David, who had always been my partner and my anchor. How would he react to what I had seen, to the truths that had been revealed to me? Would he stand by my side, or would he view my experience as a betrayal of everything we had built together? The light pulsed gently, a reassuring presence that seemed to understand my fears and doubts. It reminded me that love was not about control or certainty. It was about trust, faith, and the courage to let go of the outcome, to surrender to the divine plan. With that understanding came a sense of peace, a quiet resolve. I didn't have all the answers, nor did I need to. My role was not to dictate or to judge, but to love my family with the same unconditional, boundless love that had been shown to me. And in that love, I would find the strength to face whatever lay ahead. As the light began to dim, the images of my family dissolved into the golden glow, leaving me alone once more in the infinite expanse. But I was not the same. I had been transformed, my heart and soul forever changed by what I had seen and experienced. I felt myself being gently drawn back, the warmth of the light receding as the familiar sounds and sensations of the physical world began to return. But even as the light faded, its presence remained within me, a spark of truth, love, and hope that would guide me on the journey to come. I woke to the sound of beeping monitors and the faint murmur of voices, a stark contrast to the warmth and peace of the light. My body felt heavy, weighed down by the ache of injuries I could barely comprehend. But, despite the pain, there was an undeniable sense of clarity within me, as though my soul had been wrapped in divine truth. The sterile white ceiling of the hospital came into view, its stark brightness almost overwhelming after the golden glow I had left behind. My chest rose and fell with labored breaths, each inhale a testament to the life I had miraculously regained. The world was familiar but different, smaller, confined, and yet filled with possibility. I was alive. The realization brought tears to my eyes, a mix of gratitude and sorrow. The truth I had experienced in the light burned within me, unshakable and radiant, but I knew the road ahead would be difficult. The physical pain was the least of my worries. I had been given a mission, a calling, and I would carry it out no matter the cost. My family was the first thought that crossed my mind. David, the kids, how would they react to what had happened? Would they understand, or would they see me as a stranger? The questions swirled in my mind, but before I could dwell on them, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Nora, you're awake." It was David. He sat beside my bed, his face pale and etched with worry. His eyes brimmed with tears as he leaned closer, his hand trembling as it clasped mine. "Thank God," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "David." I rasped, my throat dry and raw. His grip tightened, his love evident in every fiber of his being. For a moment, the weight of everything melted away, replaced by the comfort of his presence. But the truth couldn't remain unspoken. It was too important, too urgent. The words left my lips before I could stop them, soft but certain. "David." I saw him. I saw the truth. His brow furrowed, confusion clouding his expression. "Him? Who?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "Jesus," I said, the name rolling off my tongue like a prayer. Jesus is Lord. The silence that followed was deafening. David's hand froze, his face shifting from worry to disbelief. Nora, you've been through a terrible ordeal. You must be confused, he said, his voice trembling. You've always believed in God. But this isn't you. It's the truth, I replied, my voice stronger now, fueled by the certainty within me. I saw him. I experienced his love. It's not what I was taught, David. It's so much more. He pulled back slightly, his hand falling away from mine. I could see the turmoil in his eyes, the struggle between his love for me and the beliefs he had held on to so tight. You're not well, he said softly. You've been through too much. But the truth wasn't something I could recant. It was woven into the very fabric of my being, a light that could not be extinguished. Over the next few days, the reality of my survival became a topic of astonishment among the doctors and nurses. They called it miraculous, a recovery that defied logic and medical explanation. But for me, the true miracle was the transformation of my soul. I wanted to share it, to tell everyone what I had experienced, but I quickly learned the world was not ready to hear it. David avoided the topic, dismissing it as delirium brought on by trauma. My children, initially joyful to see me alive, began to grow distant as David shielded them from my story. It was painful, watching the gap between us widen, but I knew the seeds of truth had been planted, even if they could not yet see it. The community's reaction was harsher still. My declaration of faith in Christ spread quickly, and the judgment was swift and unforgiving. Friends I had known for years turned away, their warm smiles replaced with cold indifference. Whispers followed me wherever I went, branding me as delusional, misguided, or worse. The life I had built, the respect I had earned, began to crumble. David tried to intervene, urging me to stay silent, to keep my experiences private. For the sake of the children, he said. For the sake of our family. But how could I stay silent when the truth burned so brightly within me? How could I deny the love and peace I had experienced? As the days turned into weeks, I began to see the cost of the truth. My relationship with David grew strained, the man who had once been my partner now feeling like a stranger. My children, confused and torn, listened to David's explanations more than they listened to me, and the community, once my support system, became a source of isolation. Yet, even in the darkness, there was love. Jesus' presence never left me, his love a constant flame within me. He didn't promise an easy path, but he promised to walk it with me, and that was enough. It was during one of the loneliest moments, when I felt the weight of rejection pressing down on me, that I found a new source of hope. A contact who had heard of my story reached out, introducing me to a small group of believers who met in secret. Like me, they had faced the cost of following the truth, but they carried it with courage and grace. Meeting them felt like coming home. Each of them had their own story, dreams, visions, experiences that had led them to Christ. Together we worshiped in secrecy, sharing our struggles and supporting one another. It was a solace I hadn't known I needed, a reminder that I was not alone. As I studied the Bible with them, the truths I had experienced in the light came to life in the verses I read. The love, sacrifice, and grace of Jesus were there, shining brightly in every. It wasn't just a book, it was the living Word of God, a guide for the journey ahead. Still, the hardest part was watching my family drift further away. David grew colder, his love for me overshadowed by his disbelief. Lila, my eldest, seemed torn, her heart soft but conflicted by the teachings she had grown up with. Adrian, always quick to defend his beliefs, became angry whenever I tried to speak. And little Clara, innocent and sweet, asked, "Mama, can I love Jesus too?" Her question brought tears to my eyes, a glimmer of hope amid the pain. Seeds of truth had been planted, and I trusted that Jesus would nurture them in his time. Through it all, I prayed, fervently, relentlessly, not just for my family, but for the community that had turned against me. I prayed for their eyes to be opened, their hearts softened, and their souls to experience the love I had found. The truth I had experienced wasn't just for me. It was for everyone, and I would share it no matter the cost. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: I was never alone. It started as whispers, murmurs in the corners of coffee shops, sideways glances in the market, polite but strained smiles that barely masked disapproval. The community I had once considered my extended family, the people who had prayed with me, laughed with me, and celebrated with me, now regarded me as an outsider, a traitor. My name began to circulate, spoken in hushed tones. I was no longer Nora Bennett, the devoted accountant and faithful mother. I had become Nora Bennett, the woman who lost her way. The rejection was immediate and sharp, and it was most painful from the people closest to me. My husband David had always been my partner, my anchor in life. But now he looked at me with a mix of disbelief and frustration. The distance between us was palpable, growing with every conversation we had about my experience. I tried to explain, to share the truth I had seen, but each attempt only widened the gap. "Nora, I don't understand what's happened to you," David said one evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion and anger. "You're not the same person anymore." "I am," I replied softly, though I knew it wasn't entirely true. "But I've seen something so profound, so life-changing." "David, it's not about losing who I was. It's about finding who I'm meant to be." He shook his head, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "You were meant to be my wife, a mother to our children, not this, whatever this is." His words stung, and I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "David, I didn't choose this," I said, my voice trembling. "It was revealed to me. I didn't ask for it, but I can't turn away from it. It's the truth." "The truth," he repeated bitterly. "Whose truth, Nora?" "Because it's certainly not ours." The argument left me drained, but I couldn't back down, not from this. The truth I had experienced was too powerful, too transformative to deny. Yet, each conversation with David seemed to chip away at the foundation we had built together. My children, too, struggled to understand. Lila, my eldest, listened quietly whenever I spoke about what I had seen, her expression unreadable, but the distance was there, a silent wall that I couldn't break through. "Mama, why can't you just be the way you were before?" Lila asked one evening, her voice soft but filled with confusion. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "Because I've seen something, Lila. Something so beautiful, so true. I wish I could show you, but you'll have to find it for yourself one day." She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't convinced. Adrian, my middle child, was less forgiving. He grew angry whenever I spoke about my experience, accusing me of abandoning everything we had been taught. "You're wrong, Mama," he said one day, his voice trembling with emotion. "You're wrong, and you're tearing this family apart." His words struck me like a blow, and I struggled to hold back tears. I'm not hurt anyone, Adrian," I said softly. "I'm trying to help you see the truth." But he wouldn't hear it, storming out of the room before I could say another word. Only little Clara seemed unaffected, her innocence shielding her from the tension that gripped our family. She would sit on my lap and ask simple, heartfelt questions. "Mama, can I love Jesus too?" she asked one evening, her wide eyes shining with curiosity. Her question filled me with hope and sorrow all at once. "Yes, my sweet girl," I said, hugging her tightly. "You can love him with all your heart." As the days turned into weeks, the conflict spread beyond my family. My colleagues, once warm and supportive, began to distance themselves. My employer called me into his office one afternoon, his expression grim. "Nora, I've heard troubling things," he said, choosing his words carefully, "about your new beliefs." I nodded, knowing where the conversation was headed. "Yes, it's true. I've experienced something life-changing." He sighed, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Nora, but this is causing tension in the office. I think it's best if we part ways. The loss of my job was devastating, but it was only the beginning. The community began to ostracize me, friends avoiding eye contact, acquaintances crossing the street to avoid me. Invitations to social gatherings stopped coming, and the whispers grew louder. I was no longer welcome in the places I had once called home. David grew colder, his frustration turning into resentment. He began to shield the children from me, limiting the time I spent with them. "You're confusing them, Nora," he said angrily. "I won't let you drag them into this." His words cut deep, but I knew he was acting out of fear, a fear of losing the life he had known, the beliefs he had built his world around. I prayed for him constantly, asking Jesus to soften his heart, to open his eyes to the truth. But even in the darkest moments, there were glimmers of hope. Through a contact who had heard about my experience, I was introduced to a small group of believers who met in secret. They were like me, people who had experienced profound spiritual awakenings, who had faced rejection and isolation because of the truth they carried. Meeting them felt like finding a lifeline. We worshiped together in secrecy, sharing our stories and supporting one another. For the first time since the accident, I felt understood, valued, and loved. They didn't see me as a traitor or a stranger. They saw me as a sister in Christ. As I studied the Bible with them, the truths I had experienced in the light came to life in the verses I read. The love, grace, and sacrifice of Jesus were there, shining brightly in every word. The Bible wasn't just a book, it was the living Word of God, a guide for the journey ahead. Despite the solace I found in this group, the pain of losing my family and community remained. David grew colder, and Lila and Adrian drifted further away. Only Clara, with her innocent questions and tender heart, seemed to remain open to the truth. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I also knew I wasn't alone. Jesus' presence was constant, his love unwavering. He didn't promise an easy path, but he promised to walk it with me, and that was enough. The whispers, the judgment, the rejection, it all hurt deeply. But through it all, I held on to the truth, the light, and the love that had transformed me. I prayed constantly, not just for myself, but for my family, my community, and even those who had turned against me. My mission was clear: to live as a reflection of Jesus' love, to share my story no matter the cost, and to trust that God would work through me to touch the hearts of those around me. The conflict wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with challenges but also with hope. The days passed, and though the storm surrounding my life showed no signs of abating, an unshakable peace anchored me. It wasn't the fleeting calm that comes from circumstances aligning in your favor. It was a deeper, soul-centered peace, planted in the core of my being. This peace was rooted not in what I could see or control, but in what I now knew to be true. Jesus was Lord, and his love was eternal. My life had been turned upside down, but it no longer felt like a loss. The rejection of my community, the fractures in my family, the whispers of friends turned strangers, these things still stung, but they no longer defined me. My identity was no longer tethered to the approval of others or the traditions I had once clung to. Instead, I found my purpose in living as a reflection of Jesus' boundless love, even in the face of opposition. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of my small apartment, I prayed, a prayer not of desperation, but of gratitude. I thanked God for the journey he had taken me on, for the truths he had revealed, and for the mission he had placed on my heart. I prayed for David, for my children, and even for those who had turned against me, asking that their hearts might one day be softened to the truth. In the weeks that followed, I began to see the seeds of change taking root. It started with Clara, my youngest, who had always been curious and open-hearted. Despite David's efforts to shield her from me, she found ways to ask questions, small, tentative inquiries that hinted at the stirrings of faith in her young heart. "Mama," she asked one evening, her voice soft but earnest, "is Jesus really as kind as you say he is?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, Clara," I said, He's kinder than you could ever imagine. He loves you more than words can describe." Her eyes lit up, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the light that had transformed my own soul. It was small, fragile, but it was there, and I knew that in time it would grow. Lila, my eldest, remained more reserved, but there were moments when her guard seemed to slip. I caught her watching me one afternoon as I read my Bible, her expression a mix of curiosity and confusion. I didn't push her. I knew that the journey to faith couldn't be forced. Instead, I prayed for her, trusting that God would work in her heart as he had in mine. Adrian was the most resistant, his anger still raw and unyielding. He avoided me whenever possible, his words sharp and cutting when he was forced to interact with me. It hurt deeply, but I held on to hope. I knew that his anger was born of fear of the unknown, fear of losing the stability he had always relied on. And I trusted that God could reach him in ways I couldn't. As for David, our marriage had become a shadow of what it once was. He refused to speak of faith, his silence heavy with unspoken pain and frustration. He focused on his work and the children, building walls around his heart that I couldn't penetrate. But I didn't stop loving him, and I didn't stop praying for him. I knew that the journey of faith was often a long and winding road, and I was willing to wait. Outside of my family, my life found new purpose in the secret fellowship I had discovered. The small group of believers welcomed me with open arms, their stories echoing my own. Together we worshiped, studied the Bible, and supported one another through the challenges of living out our faith in a world that often rejected us. It was with their encouragement that I began to share my story more publicly, not to seek attention or validation, but to plant seeds of truth in the hearts of others. I started writing, pouring my experiences into words that I hoped would reach those who were searching, those who felt the same doubts and questions I once had. The response was both humbling and overwhelming. Messages began to pour in, some filled with anger and accusations, others with heartfelt gratitude. People from all walks of life reached out, sharing their own struggles, doubts, and revelations. Many of them were searching for the same love and truth I had found, and it was a privilege to point them toward it. Of course, not everyone was supportive. There were threats, warnings to stop spreading blasphemy, attempts to discredit me. But through it all, I felt a profound sense of purpose. I wasn't doing this for myself, I was doing it for him. One day, as I walked through the streets of Sibiu, a familiar figure approached me. It was Anka, a woman I had known for years through our community. Her expression was guarded, but her eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. "Nora," she said hesitantly, "I've been hearing things about you, about what you believe now." I nodded, meeting her gaze. "It's true," I said simply. "I've found a new truth, a new life in Christ." She hesitated, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I don't understand it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stop thinking about it." I smiled, my heart swelling with hope. "Anka," I said gently, "it's not something you have to understand all at once. It's a journey, and it starts with an open heart." We spoke for hours that day, sitting on a park bench as the sun dipped below the horizon. I shared my story, and she shared hers, the doubts she had carried, the questions she had buried. By the time we parted ways, tears glistened in her eyes, and I knew that a seed had been planted. Encounters like that became more frequent, each one a reminder of the power of Jesus' love to transform hearts and lives. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of pain, of doubt, of loneliness. But through it all, I felt his presence, his guidance, and his unshakable love. As I look back on everything that has happened, I see a tapestry woven with threads of both joy and sorrow, each one contributing to the story of my life. It's a story of transformation, of redemption, of a love so profound it cannot be contained. I don't know what the future holds, whether my family will come to share my faith, whether my community will ever accept me again. But I do know this: I am exactly where I am meant to be, living a life that reflects the love and truth of Jesus Christ. And that is enough.